When you deal with toxic people, it's not always their words that wear you down. It's your reaction to those words. They know how to push your buttons, twist your intentions, and get under your skin until you start defending yourself, raising your voice, or second-guessing what you meant. That's their fuel. They feed off your emotional energy because it gives them control. The more you react, the more power they feel. And once you start realizing that your reaction is the food that keeps their behavior alive, something shifts inside you. You stop seeing their chaos as something you need to fix, and you start seeing it as something you don't need to feed. Toxic people love to create emotional loops. They say something outrageous or unfair, you defend yourself, and suddenly you're in a debate that doesn't even make sense. They don't want resolution. They want reaction. It's like playing tug of war. The moment you drop the rope, the game ends. That's what not feeding the reaction loop really means. It doesn't mean you ignore everything or stay silent out of fear. It means you become selective with your emotional energy. You choose peace over proving a point. You understand that not every accusation deserves an answer, and not every opinion needs your approval. When you stop feeding the loop, you break their pattern. At first, they'll try harder. They'll test your silence, your calm, your patience. They'll push to see if they can still get that rise out of you. But when you respond with composure instead of reaction, it disarms them. They start realizing that their tactics don't work anymore. It's not instant and it's not always easy, but over time, they lose interest because there's no emotional reward. You're not reacting. You're not defending, you're not engaging in their emotional tug of war, you're simply choosing not to play. This shift takes practice. It's human nature to want to defend yourself, to explain your side, to make them understand. But with toxic people, logic doesn't land, emotion does. That's what they look for. They listen for tone, not truth. They're not trying to understand, they're trying to control. When you start recognizing that, you save yourself from unnecessary exhaustion. You start preserving your peace by refusing to participate in their emotional theater. You don't owe them an audience, and you don't owe them your reaction. That's where your power comes back, in the pause between what they say and how you choose to respond. It helps to slow down in those moments. When someone throws a sarcastic comment or a guilt trip your way, take a breath. Remind yourself that your silence is not weakness, it's strength in disguise. You can acknowledge what was said without adding fuel to it. You can say, I hear you, or that's your opinion, and leave it there. You're not agreeing, you're not arguing, you're ending the energy exchange. Over time, your lack of reaction becomes louder than any argument could be. It's not about being cold, it's about being in control of your peace. The people who thrive on drama will call you distant, uncaring, or too calm. That's because they've lost their ability to pull you into their storm. But what they don't understand is that you've simply chosen to stop dancing to their rhythm. You've learned that silence can be a statement and stillness can be strength. Once you master that, the dynamic shifts completely. You're no longer the one reacting, you're the one observing. You can see their manipulation without letting it touch you. And in that quiet strength, they start to feel small in their own noise. The truth is, the most powerful way to get a toxic person to leave you alone isn't confrontation, it's disinterest. When they realize you don't react, don't explain, don't feed into their drama, they look for someone else who will. And that's the real victory. Not proving them wrong, but proving to yourself that your peace is not for sale. Once you stop feeding their reaction loop, they'll have nothing left to feed on, and slowly they'll disappear from the space they use to dominate. When someone attacks your character, criticizes your choices, or tries to make you feel small, your natural instinct is to defend yourself. You start explaining why you said what you said, why you did what you did, and why you didn't mean to hurt them. But the moment you begin defending, you've already stepped into their frame. Toxic people thrive on that because defending sounds like begging for understanding, and that's where they gain leverage. They twist your words, dismiss your explanations, and suddenly you're trying to prove your worth in a conversation that was never about understanding you in the first place. Defending puts you on their playing field. Defining builds your own. The difference between defending and defining is power. When you defend, you react. When you define, you lead. Defending keeps you in explanation mode, hoping the other person will finally get it. But toxic people don't want clarity. They want control. They'll pretend not to understand just to keep you talking, just to keep you explaining. Defining, on the other hand, is calm, simple, and final. It's saying, this is what I meant, this is what I allow, or this is what I won't discuss. You're not asking for approval or understanding. You're stating facts, and facts don't need defending. Facts just are. Think of it like setting a boundary with confidence instead of emotion. Defending is emotional. It comes from fear, guilt, or the desire to be liked. Defining is grounded. It comes from knowing your truth. When someone accuses you of being selfish because you said no, defending sounds like, I'm not selfish, I just have a lot going on right now. But defining sounds like, I'm not available for that. Same situation, different energy. One invites debate, the other ends it. Toxic people can argue opinions all day, but they can't argue a clear definition of what you will or won't tolerate. You don't need to justify every decision you make, especially to people who question them just to feel in control. That's where many people get stuck. They confuse communication with convincing. You can communicate your boundaries without trying to convince someone to accept them. You can say, that doesn't work for me, and let the silence do the rest. The more you define, the less room there is for manipulation. You're not reacting emotionally, you're standing logically. And the moment you stop chasing their approval, they lose their grip on you. You stop defending because there's nothing left to prove. Defining doesn't mean being cold or harsh. It means being consistent. Toxic people test boundaries, not because they misunderstand them, but because they want to see if you'll enforce them. When you stay firm, calm, and clear, they realize that emotional manipulation won't work anymore. The goal isn't to win an argument, it's to stop having the same one over and over again. Defining gives you peace because it ends cycles. It replaces exhaustion with clarity and chaos with control. It's a subtle shift, but it's one that completely changes how people treat you. This shift also changes how you see yourself. When you stop defending, you stop needing people to see you as the good one. You realize you don't need to prove your intentions or your kindness. You just need to live them. Toxic people might still label you as cold, distant, or prideful when you start defining instead of defending, but that's just because they can't manipulate you anymore. You're no longer playing by their emotional rules. You're writing your own rules, speaking your own truth, and refusing to over-explain it. That's what true confidence feels like: calm, grounded, and unapologetic. And here's the beauty of it. Once you master this shift, conversations start to change. You spend less time explaining yourself and more time living by your standards. You stop chasing understanding from people who will never give it and start attracting those who respect your clarity. The moment you move from defending to defining, you stop being reactive and start being respected. Toxic people don't know how to argue with definition, and when they can't pull you into defense, they slowly back away because your peace no longer entertains their chaos. When you deal with toxic people, they don't just drain your time, they drain your emotions. Every word, every interaction becomes a test of your patience, your kindness, your self-control. You walk away feeling like you've been in a storm you didn't sign up for. That's because toxic people operate through emotion. They know how to trigger guilt, frustration, or self-doubt. They turn every simple conversation into an emotional trap, and the more you care, the easier it is for them to pull you in. Detaching your emotion doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop carrying their chaos inside your peace. You stop letting their storm become your weather. Emotional detachment gets misunderstood. People think it means becoming cold, distant, or indifferent. But real detachment is the opposite. It's emotional control. It's being able to care without being consumed. You can feel empathy for someone and still recognize when they're being manipulative. You can love someone and still decide that their behavior isn't healthy for you. Detachment allows you to separate what's yours from what's theirs. Their anger doesn't have to become your anger. Their disappointment doesn't have to make you feel guilty. When you stay grounded in your own emotions, you stop being dragged into theirs. Toxic people want to see you react because it gives them evidence of control. The more they can make you upset, the more they can convince themselves that they matter. They'll say things that sound like concern but are actually criticism. They'll disguise manipulation as honesty and try to make you question your own feelings. That's why clarity is so important. When you detach emotionally, you can see what's actually happening instead of how it feels. You stop reacting to tone and start listening to truth. You start noticing patterns instead of excuses. That's the clarity that comes when your emotions are calm enough to see through the fog. To detach emotionally, you have to create a small pause between what they do and how you respond. That pause is power. It's the space where you choose logic over impulse. Toxic people thrive on quick emotional reactions. The text you send out of anger, the argument you start to set the record straight, the guilt you feel when they play the victim. But when you pause, breathe, and respond only after you're centered, you take back control. You're no longer dancing to their rhythm. You're moving at your own pace. That's how detachment works. Not by cutting people off immediately, but by refusing to let them control your emotional tempo. The best part of detachment is how peaceful it feels once you practice it. You stop taking everything personally. You stop overanalyzing their tone, their silence, their moods. You realize that how they act says more about them than it ever will about you. Emotional detachment gives you the ability to walk away from manipulation with dignity instead of guilt. You can say no and not feel selfish. You can let someone be upset with you and still sleep peacefully at night. That's not coldness, and that's emotional maturity. You're not avoiding feelings. You're just refusing to drown in someone else's. This kind of clarity takes time to build because emotions are habits. If you've spent years reacting, explaining, and overthinking, detachment feels unnatural at first. You might feel guilty for being calm. You might even doubt yourself and think you're the problem, but that's just conditioning. The habit of confusing chaos with connection. Once you realize that love doesn't have to hurt and peace doesn't need to be earned, detachment starts to make sense. You begin to see how protecting your emotions doesn't mean building walls. It means setting filters. You filter what deserves your energy and what doesn't. And when you live with that kind of clarity, toxic people slowly fade out. They can't feed on what you don't give. They can't twist calmness into conflict. They can't make you doubt your worth when your emotions are grounded in truth. Emotional detachment doesn't push people away. It protects you from those who come too close with bad intentions. It's the quiet skill that keeps your peace steady no matter who tries to shake it. Once you learn to detach the emotion and keep the clarity, you stop living in reaction and start living in control. Silence is one of the most misunderstood tools in communication. People often think that silence means weakness, avoidance, or lack of confidence, but that's only true when silence comes from fear. When silence comes from strength, it becomes one of the most powerful responses you can use. Toxic people expect resistance. They want arguments, explanations, and emotional reactions. That's their fuel. But when you respond with calm silence instead of defending yourself, they lose that control. They start to realize their words aren't landing anymore. Silence becomes a mirror, and in that mirror, they start seeing themselves more clearly than ever before. Toxic people are loud because they want to dominate the space. They talk over you, twist your words, and push you into reacting. Every time you raise your voice or try to out-argue them, you feed their sense of power. But silence interrupts that cycle. It creates discomfort for them because it leaves their manipulation hanging in the air without validation. You're not agreeing, you're not disagreeing, you're just not playing the game. That's what silence does. It removes the energy that keeps toxic behavior alive. You stop giving them the attention they crave, and eventually they start to lose interest in provoking you. Silence doesn't mean you ignore the issue. It means you control the timing and tone of your response. You decide when and how to engage. You can listen without reacting. You can observe without participating. Silence allows you to gather your thoughts while they expose theirs. The more they talk to fill the space, the more their patterns become obvious. You'll start noticing how predictable their tactics are: the guilt trips, the exaggerated emotions, the shifting of blame. When you stay silent in those moments, you're not powerless. You're gathering clarity. You're giving yourself time to see the truth without their noise clouding it. The reason silence works so well is because it breaks expectation. Toxic people are used to triggering an immediate emotional payoff. When you stay calm and quiet, it disorients them. They start searching for a reaction that isn't coming. That's when their mask slips and their real intentions come out. You'll notice how quickly the conversation changes when they realize you're not giving them what they want. Silence exposes manipulation faster than confrontation ever will, because when you resist, they resist harder. But when you're silent, they can only argue with themselves. Using silence effectively takes practice. You have to learn to be comfortable in that stillness, especially when the other person tries to fill it with anger or guilt. It can feel uncomfortable at first because you're conditioned to respond, to explain, to fix things. But real power is in restraint. The less you say, the more intentional your words become. The less you argue, the more peace you keep. You're not ignoring them. You're choosing not to participate in dysfunction. Silence becomes your boundary. It says, you don't get to control this space anymore. And that message lands even without a single word. Silence also gives you something most people overlook: time. Time to process your emotions before reacting. Time to decide whether this conversation even deserves your energy. Toxic people rush you into emotional responses because speed is their advantage. They want you off balance, defensive, and emotional. But when you slow the conversation down with silence, you shift the control back to you. Suddenly, they can't predict your next move, and unpredictability makes manipulation difficult. You're no longer playing catch-up, you're leading with calm. That's how silence transforms from stillness into strength. Over time, silence changes your entire presence. People start to notice that you don't react the way you used to. You don't explain yourself in circles or match someone's chaos with more chaos. You let words fall without picking them up. You let accusations hang without answering them. You stop rushing to fill uncomfortable moments, and that calm becomes intimidating to people who feed on control. The more comfortable you get with silence, the less power toxic people have over you. Because once you realize that you don't owe everyone an explanation, you stop being controlled by those who demand one. Your peace is not a luxury. It's your foundation. It's the space you think from, breathe from, and live from. When toxic people enter your life, they don't just create noise, they create cracks in that foundation. They do it slowly. A sarcastic comment here, a guilt trip there, an invasion of your time that starts to feel normal. But protecting your peace means realizing it's not just a feeling, it's your personal property. You wouldn't let someone walk into your house, rearrange your furniture, and tell you how to live. So why let them do it with your mind, your emotions, or your energy? Peace doesn't protect itself. It's not passive. It's intentional. It's something you build, maintain, and guard. Toxic people test those boundaries not because they misunderstand them, but because they want to see if you'll enforce them. Protecting your peace means locking the doors of your attention. It means deciding who gets to enter your emotional space and who doesn't. You have to treat your peace like something valuable, because it is. You can't share it with everyone just because you care about them. Caring doesn't mean allowing. Love doesn't mean access. When you start protecting your peace, you stop giving emotional discounts to people who never earned them. To protect your peace, you have to start recognizing what drains it. Sometimes it's the constant need to explain yourself. Sometimes it's overcommitting to people who never show up for you. And sometimes it's keeping communication open with someone who's proven they only bring stress. Protecting your peace doesn't mean cutting everyone off. It means being strategic. It's learning the art of emotional budgeting. Just like you wouldn't spend money you don't have, you stop giving energy to things that don't give anything back. That's not selfishness. That's self-respect. You start measuring interactions not by how much you care, but by how much they cost you mentally. Toxic people will always make you feel guilty for choosing peace. They'll call you distant, unkind, or hard to reach. That's because they benefited from your lack of boundaries. They're not upset that you changed. They're upset that they lost access. And that's when you have to remember, peace doesn't come from pleasing others. It comes from protecting yourself. You can still be kind, but you don't have to be available. You can still care, but you don't have to carry. Every time you choose silence over reaction, distance over drama, and clarity over confusion, you're reinforcing that boundary. You're teaching people that your peace is not negotiable. Protecting your peace also means learning to leave certain things unsaid. Not every argument needs closure. Not every accusation deserves a response. Sometimes the most powerful move you can make is walking away quietly and choosing calm over chaos. It's about realizing that protecting your peace doesn't require anyone else's permission. It's not about making them understand. It's about making yourself free. When you stop chasing explanations and start accepting what is, you save yourself from emotional exhaustion. You stop needing validation from people who never respected your value in the first place. Over time, protecting your peace changes the way you see yourself. You stop feeling guilty for saying no. You stop apologizing for needing space. You stop shrinking to fit people who thrive on control. You begin to notice how peaceful life feels when you no longer let everyone have access to your emotions. That's when peace becomes your normal state, not just a temporary escape. You move through life with more patience, more presence, and more perspective because your emotional doors are locked to negativity. You're not avoiding the world. You're choosing who gets to sit at your table and who doesn't. And when you live like that, toxic people leave on their own. They can't function where peace is protected. They can't manipulate someone who knows their worth. When they realize they can't disturb your energy, they go looking for someone who hasn't learned what you now know, that your peace is sacred, that it's your home, and that you don't let anyone live there rent-free